Good morning. As believers, we are called to be the body of Christ in our relationship with God, within our local community of faith, and to those whom God has placed in and along our paths. The leaders of Christ Church, those whom we have prayerfully entrusted with the guidance of our mission, are once again calling us to give above and beyond our tithes and offerings. As we enter into this special capital campaign, and throughout its duration, let's all remember why we are called to this particular task. For many of us, our initial response to a capital campaign is, didn't we just do that? Yes, we did. And with that, we began a great work in the ongoing history of Christ Church, a work for which we are all quite grateful. The results of that effort quite literally surround us. We are blessed with these beautiful facilities, an enhanced worship experience, and an extraordinary witness to the community at large. But there is still much to be done. We are now challenged with our responsibilities and blessed with our opportunities to move forward yet again. The mission of the church always looks to the future, and our leadership has identified various needs which must be met in order to approach the potential that God has for us. The latest call for our gifts and support are solidly anchored in the biblical witness. Let's consider 4 scriptural reasons why we are called to give. The first of these reasons is obedience. Romans 13:7 and 8 says, "Pay to all what is due them, taxes to whom taxes are due, revenue to whom revenue is due, respect to whom respect is due, honor to whom honor is due. Owe no one anything except to love one another, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." Debts are to be avoided, but obligations are to be kept. This is the clear meaning of the words of the Apostle Paul to the church at Rome. Above all, our obligations is to love one another as God has loved us and Christ has loved the church. Several years ago, our church assumed a financial obligation in order to meet the needs of our congregation and community. It was visionary and responsible. Now it is time to complete that obligation, both to be in a position to owe nothing but love, but also to set an example to our community. Good stewardship is good witness. Our second reason is abundance. In the Gospel of John, the 6th chapter, Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. When they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they began to say, "This is indeed the prophet who has come into the world." Most of us are familiar with the story of the feeding of the 5,000 and the multiplying of the loaves and fishes. A hungry audience, a disappointingly small quantity of bread and fish. We also know the rest of the story. The masses fed with 12 baskets remaining. It's easy to miss Jesus' point with the provisions left over. He could have multiplied just enough to fulfill their cravings, plates cleaned, appetites satisfied. The story could have ended there with only a passing mention in the written gospel. But the story doesn't end with mere satisfaction. Jesus goes above and beyond such that there are baskets of leftovers, more than is needed. Abundance. Overage that is called a sign meaning that it tells us something of the nature of the Christ. Do you see it? We are given our resources by God, just as Jesus expanded the meager items collected. It is an example of both God's love for us and how we are to give. To merely satisfy is not enough. Abundance is never wasted. Let us follow the example of the Christ in our giving, lavishly, and not to stop with enough. The third reason we need to consider is love. In Paul's letter to the Corinthians, the second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 8, we want you to know, brothers and sisters, about the grace of God that has been granted to the churches of Macedonia, for during a severe ordeal or affliction, their abundant joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For as I can testify, they voluntarily gave according to their means, begging us earnestly for the privilege of sharing in this ministry to the saints. And this, not merely as we expected, they gave themselves first to the Lord, and by the will of God to us, so that we might urge Titus that, as he has already made a beginning, so he should also complete this generous undertaking among you. Now, as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in utmost eagerness, and in our love for you, so we want you to excel also in this generous undertaking. Yes, the Apostle Paul, yet again. The church in Corinth, his prodigal church, is being exhorted to give from a place of love. Love indeed. The same church that suffered from a lack of it, and furthermore, this agape love for Paul is inextricably tied to generosity. Let's look especially at the 3rd and 4th verses. Giving for the work of Christian ministry is not limited to our available means, but goes beyond them, far beyond. Why? For the simple privilege of giving out of love, voluntarily, without being prodded or asked. Love is something that comes from deep within, birthed from a sure knowledge of God's love for us through the Christ and His example. Would that we all would ask for the privilege of giving out of our abundance. And the 4th reason we wish to consider is for joy. Simply read the passage from 2 Corinthians again, and note especially the first 2 verses. Note the words ordeal, joy, and poverty. 2 of these words we would see as a negative. There's a disconnect. They are not usually words found in the same sentence, ordeal and poverty. However, Paul's words are striking and well chosen. The key is to be found in the first verse, grace. The lesson is this: grace leads to love, which leads to generosity, which leads to joy. True joy that comes from a life lived in the fullness of grace. Jesus told us that He came that our joy might be full. Generosity, a good lesson for us all. It can be tempting to find proof texts to bolster our very human ideas, to start with an idea or program and then to hunt for some biblical support. We all have done it. However, the Capital Campaign team and the leadership of Christ Church firmly believe that the situation is the other way around. We have a biblical mandate to grow, to minister, to meet physical and spiritual need. We have the Christ Himself for our role model, who set the example of generosity in abundance. As we enter into this time of examination and commitment, let us all consider His example and the kingdom work to which we are called. Let us humble ourselves before the grace of God and respond to what we have been given with the love that leads to joy.